I think there's a lot of preparation you can do before you move over here, connecting with people, asking your network in Australia, do you know anyone in England, or do you know anyone in New York, or wherever you're thinking of going? And using those connections, I think, are really cool to start. Hey, I'm on my way over. Can we grab a coffee? I land on this date. Where are you based? I'm happy to come to you. And even just getting your name out there and making it known, because things like the Mullagh Group, there might be jobs that come up and we say, oh, actually, Ruben's about to move over. He'd be great for this. You should have a chat to him.
G'day guys, on the show today is Chris Dobson. Chris is an Australian living in the UK who is the commercial director at DMC Sport, whose work includes producing and delivering participation kits for junior programs like Woolworths Cricket Blast in Australia and similar with the English and Wales Cricket Board over in the UK. Chris is also one of the early members of the Mullagh Group, a network for Australians working in sport in London. Chris has been in the UK for over 6 years now and is well versed in how to make the jump to establish yourself in London and find work in sport. And if you're interested in making the London move in the future, you are going to absolutely love Chris's advice. So let's go.
I started volunteering.
It's all about who you know in sport.
Am I going to be calling the last 10 seconds of the grand final?
You can connect with the interviewer. The hand goes up when they've got to make a decision.
Having a network is one of the most important things you can do.
I didn't necessarily follow my passion. I followed my curiosity.
Once you've worked in sport, there's no going back.
And then lo and behold, before I left, I got offered two.
Hello and welcome to the Sports Grad Podcast, the ultimate guide to make it in the sports industry. I'm Ryan Walker and joining me is the Prince of Aix-en-Provence, Ruben Williams. And we have two mates who met at Cricket Australia back in the day. And each week we learn how people made it in the sports industry. We tease out some of their career decisions, their work habits, skills, and everything they do that makes them great. All it's so that you can learn how to get in, get promoted, and get thriving in the sports industry. Rubes, you're a prince of another location. How are you, my friend?
G'day, Ryan. I'm doing well. Thank you. Pleasure to see you as always. I think you've labelled me the prince of about a dozen different locations now. So we might have to revisit the creativity in your titles, I think. But I am enjoying Aix-en-Provence. It's a beautiful part of southern France. It's very quiet down here. So we're having a good time. But the podcast setup for this particular episode is pretty rogue. We're on the couch with the laptop perched on a stand of washing that's currently drying at the moment. So you got to do what you got to do when you're on the road and trying to podcast at the same time. But how are you going, mate?
I'm going well. I've just got back from Sydney, so we had our Sydney meetup on about a week ago now, a week and a half ago now, which was absolutely awesome. Getting up there and seeing some of our Sydney members and some of the organisations we work with as well. And I managed to get to the Matildas game on last Monday as well. So absolutely incredible experience. I think I posted on LinkedIn about a week ago now, and today, which we're recording, and I just thought it was one of the best experiences in sport I've ever had in my life. Nearly 80,000 at Australia Stadium in Sydney was just something else. So, I'm on a bit of a high at the moment. I just thought it was a brilliant time in Sydney, and it just capped off by being able to see the Tilly. So, it's been a good few days.
Fantastic. Well, it's been an incredibly active period since we last spoke to people, because you've been to the Matildas. The Matildas would have played again when people hear this as well. We've got the quarterfinals coming up on Saturday, so fingers crossed that's another excellent result for us. But then in the meantime, we had episode 250 last week, but we didn't talk about what was going on in the sports grad community at the same time. Because since then, people would have seen that we closed the doors of the sports grad community to do some work on it. However, one of the things that came across our desk was this understanding that there's a whole lot of young professionals working in sport who are tuning into what we do. So our initial sort of build the sports grad community up again has kind of almost taken a side seat for the time being whilst we look at what Sports Grad Pro could be, because we put out the word during the week on Instagram and LinkedIn to say, hey, we've noticed something. Is this anything? Do you guys want some more content around stuff that makes you great at work once you get into the industry? And we're currently recording this on Wednesday morning my time. I've just kind of seen the results of another LinkedIn post. It looks like it's pretty positive. So I'm not sure what's going to happen in the SportsGrad Pro space between now and when people start to hear this episode. But we could be on for a new newsletter.
Yeah, it's I did see that poll, and it seemed like it was absolutely going off. So we've unearthed something, Ruse, which is enormous, and you know, as you would know, and as many of our listeners know, we do move fairly quickly at SportsGrad HQ. So I've got no doubt by the next time we record, there'll be probably more to say on this. So definitely stay tuned. It's a really exciting time for us, and yeah, we're pumped. It's pretty awesome. So another thing that came across my desk, by the way, and you know, I think I've whipped out a stat every now and again on the podcast. It's not a huge strength of mine to find little stats, but something came across my desk early this morning from our good friend of the show, Chris McPherson. He would be listening right now. And he actually provided me with some data on the time that we've spent on this podcast. 250 episodes. This is 251, so this isn't counted, but we've actually sat on this podcast for 147 hours and 4 minutes over the journey. So that is essentially 250 conversations and over 147 hours spent chatting with you and also other legends in the sports industry. So I thought that is a bit of a fun stat for those playing along at home who love their sports and their data. A little fun fact for you on Monday.
Well, that is not too far off an entire week of podcasting, because I think a week has got 168 hours, so 147 is not far off it. So I don't know. Imagine just doing a week straight of podcasting and talking to each other. It'd be a lot. But it reminds me actually of
we'd need a year off.
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine that, the podcast marathon. See how long you can survive for talking. But that actually jogs my memory, because we had one person message me on LinkedIn probably a couple of months ago now saying, "Hey, Ruben, I've just discovered the podcast and I have binged every single episode in 3.5 weeks on like 2 times speed." And, you know, if we've recorded for almost an entire week and someone's listening to it in 3 weeks, that's like a third of every single day for 3 weeks listening to us, which is outstanding. Yeah. I'm not sure the maths are perfect on that, but it's a lot of SportsGrad in your ears every single day for a very intense period of time.
Yeah, we love the super fans, and you know, we're not going to blow our own trumpet and say there's a lot of super fans out there, but when they do pop up, we absolutely love them. So shout out to everyone who has binged the show. We absolutely love it, and continue to do so. So, and they're part of our community, obviously. And speaking of the community, it continues to grow. Here's some stats, by the way. Over 95 members last week join our community, which for context for everybody, and we're happy to say this publicly, like our best month of all time, we got 72 new members in, right? And in the space of 48 hours, whilst it was Thursday to Friday, whilst I was in Sydney, we had 95 join in that period, and then another 5 or so joined from the meetup. So we cracked the ton in the space of 48 hours. So that was off the back of us closing it and putting a little bit more scarcity with it, which is fantastic. But that is just an unbelievable stat as well. So that's part of our community update. But there's been some wins as well, Rubes.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a wild period. But in terms of some wins for the community, first one I want to shout out is Alyssa Cullinan, who's just got an incredible role as the member services assistant at the Adelaide Crows. The Crows are flying at the moment. It'd be a great place to be a part of, especially with Big Tex doing his thing down there. So well done to you, Alyssa, joining our good friend Path down there, who's absolutely flying in his new role. And the other one is Lizzie Rupchich, who has just become the media intern at Disability Sport Australia, another fantastic organisation and another incredible opportunity for Lizzie to get her foot in the door. So well done to you two girls. And then, of course, we've always got events coming up. Last week, we had She Hoops jump on a job fair where we had over 40 people get along to it, Ryan, which is outstanding. I wasn't there. It was 4 a.m. in the morning for me, so I couldn't make that one. But I understand it was absolutely outstanding. I saw the screenshots of it. I saw the photos, and it just looked incredible. All these brand new people jumping on for the first time, which is amazing to see. But there's plenty more of that coming up. We do a job fair every single month. We've got speed networking happening tonight as of the day that this episode goes out, which will be a Monday. So if you want to stay up to date with when the next release or the next intake of members is coming up, head to sportsgrad.com.au/community to join the wait list. And if you want to hear about all the different events that are coming up and get some advice in your inbox every Friday about how to get closer to a job in sport, then our newsletter is the next best place to stay up to date with all that. So sportsgrad.com.au/newsletter is where you can jump in and get that.
I'm pumped for this episode, Rubes. It's an absolute ripper. So grab a pen and enjoy this chat with Chris Dobson. Everybody wants to study at one of the top unis in the world for sport. And at Deakin, you can do just that. So don't miss your chance to see what sets them apart at their campus open days this August. Check out the state-of-the-art facilities, hear from their world-class academics, meet with current students and experience the campus vibe that they're famous for. Join thousands of the brightest students who have already registered to attend this unmissable event. Search Deakin Open Day and take your first step towards achieving your ultimate career. The Geelong Open Day is on the 20th of August, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And of course, Burwood Open Day is the 27th of August at 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So check it out now and start your career in sport. Chris, welcome to the Sports Grad podcast.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. I've been watching you guys from afar for a little while now, so it's good to finally catch up and jump into the podcast.
It's wonderful to have you on, Chris. Now, you're joining us live from the UK, where less than 24 hours ago, Australia lost the last test in the Ashes. How is it being an Australian in London at the moment? Are you copying a bit of lit from people?
Look, it's been up and down, much like the series. Actually, it's thankfully we've had the 2-0 to start with to sort of back us up a little bit there, and it's that's helped, and so we've known, and then obviously once Manchester got rained out, we kind of couldn't lose the urn anyway, and so then it was about whether we could try and actually win the series, which as you probably know that we weren't able to do, but I was lucky or unlucky enough yesterday to drop down to the Oval after work and watch the Aussies collapse, but I got to experience the English crowd revved up and enjoying their Broad's last game and drawing the series, which I think they probably in the end deserved to, given the results of the last 2 or 3 tests.
I can't believe, and this is just for me, that a 41-year-old in Jimmy Anderson is going to retire after Stuart Broad. I find that super, super unusual, but I'm also quite happy to see the back of Stuart Broad personally as well.
100%. 100%.
From a bloke point of view and also a player point of view.
Yeah. Although he's won me over a little bit more recently with his charm, and I think he's played up to that villain a little bit more than what he actually is. But given his as a player, he's had the wood over us, and even yesterday he did the bail swap, and I said to my mate, I was like, he's just swapped the bail. This is what he did last time, and then literally the next ball he got a wicket. And I was like, you can see the cheeky smile on his face. I was like, that wasn't good. But anyway, it's been good.
No, very good. Now, every episode we start with some quick fire questions of our guests. So, designed for those listening in to learn a little bit about you from the get-go, and then we'll get into some more deeper questions as we go. So, I'll start. What was your first ever job?
Well, I grew up in country Victoria, in a town called Shepparton, which you may or may not know. But yeah, we had a number of jobs, my brothers and I. But sort of my main real first job with a real paycheck that wasn't sort of a parent's friend or something was Big W stacking shelves, something that a lot of youngsters have to do. But also being in Shepparton, picking fruit at during the summer was also pretty a rite of passage for people in Shep.
Nice. Helping out SPC, the major employer in town, I'm
that's
sure.
Right.
Yep.
That's right. Yeah.
And what did you study at university?
Yeah, so I took a year off after high school and worked at Lauriston Girls' School, who have a campus up near Mount Buller. So I did a year up there as like a outdoor ed sort of teacher's assistant, because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and then enjoyed that, and that led me to doing a PE degree at Vic Uni. So did a PE and English teaching degree, down in Footscray and Melton.
Very nice. What was your favourite sporting moment?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot. I love watching all sport. There's not too much I don't like watching and being at, but being a D's supporter, the 2021 in a pub with sort of 200 people in London was pretty good, with a couple of good mates who are Melbourne supporters as well. That was excellent. More recently, got to be courtside for an NBA final game. Or at least during the warm up with LeBron warming up, that was pretty spectacular. Sort of seeing the size of the guys there, and then it was a good game. I can't remember what game it was of the series, but it was on for young and old, and that was pretty special as well.
Amazing. You'd want to reach out and touch him. What about interview questions? What's your favourite question to ask of candidates?
We've actually been recruiting in the last little while, and a lot of our recruiting or questions anyway are around trying to find out more about the person. We get a lot of information from CVs and LinkedIn these days that we try and find out about the person. So they're my favourite questions, getting to know culturally whether they're going to be a right fit. So I really like asking if you have a spare 20, 24, 48 hours on the weekend or a day off or whatever, what would you ideally like to do, just to get a sense of what they're about, what they're socially and kind of even extracurricular, what if they play sport, if they travel, music, whatever it might be. So they're my favourite questions, although it's pretty standard. I do like finding more about the person outside of what we can read on the CV.
Nice. Is there a book or a podcast that you'd recommend to our listeners that's helped you with work?
Help me with work. I do. There's a couple that I do stay in touch with the Australian sporting through your kind of SENs and a few of those kind of podcasts, which I don't know if it helps me with work, but it definitely keeps me up to date. I'm just having a look at my podcast list here because I
is the Sounding Board podcast with Hutchie and Damo.
Yeah, I don't mind the sounding. I was actually listening to that this morning. Yeah, that's good because it's
great podcast.
It is because they I like how they kind of cross from sport. Like this morning's one, I listened to on my way to work. They were talking about the Ashes and Matildas and all that kind of stuff. But then, then they cross over to the kind of business or the media side of things, which is really cool. How they built this, or how I built this, is another podcast where they interview. It's probably gone off the boil a little bit more recently, but where they interview CEOs or founders of organisations, companies, and how they did it. And those stories are pretty fascinating of resilience or good luck, whatever it might have been, to build. And often it's, they'll do, kind of the guy that's, the people that started Uber or the people that started Canva or some of these organisations, which are now, massive. It's, they all started somewhere and it's fascinating to listen to, to where that came from.
Yep. I've enjoyed that one too. That's a ripper. And any grassroots clubs that you're associated with?
It's been been ingrained in me to be involved in grassroots sports, but from early days in Shepparton. A lot of footy, hockey, tennis clubs, and grew up with my dad and mum involved in the committees and being presidents. And my family's not so well. My direct family not so well known for the playing side, but fairly good on the administration side and the volunteering side. And so currently over here, involved with the North London Lions Aussie Rules team over here that plays in the AFL London comp, which has been really good fun since I moved. Didn't have any huge intentions of being involved in grassroots sport here because I'd sort of had done my time a little bit in Melbourne and being involved in coaching and on the committee at North Old Boys in the Amos. In Brunswick there, but happened to move in next door to a couple of Aussies, and they convinced me to go to training, and next thing I know, we're involved in coaching and involved on the committee and all that kind of stuff. So it's been great, met lots of great people, and it's the grassroots club here in London is not that much different to one in Melbourne or Australia. Just a bit more transient really, because you got the 2-year visas. Sort of forcing people to leave, but there's a good crew of us older guys and girls that are involved, and it's been really good.
Nice. It sounds like a good vibe. And finally, if you had 30 minutes to pick someone's brain, who would it be?
That's a good one. I should have researched this one a little bit more. I think there's some really old ones, but I guess obvious ones. But I think in terms of sports and sort of sports administration, sports development, and the commercial side of things. Anyone that's really, I look sort of internally at things like the Melbourne Football Club, North Melbourne Football Club now, Melbourne Storm. And I know I'm being very Melbourne centric there, but sort of clubs and organisations that have been through some tough times that are now coming through the end, and not to say that some of those are right through to the end, but the people involved in those kind of situations, I think, would be fascinating. And those clubs exist all around the world. There's at the moment here, it's not often that there's not a club in the EPL going through some sort of administration turmoil. Even Ange at Tottenham now is having some trouble with his owners and stuff like that. So anyone like that's been involved during those situations, I'd love to sit down and just map out the process or the journey that they went through to come out the other end. Again, I love those stories of resilience and tough work to get to a point where you can feel a bit of success. I think that'd be really cool.
Wonderful. That would be very cool to hear. Speaking of timelines and journeys, let's dive into yours now. Could you walk us through how some of those early days in Melbourne and Victoria led you to being in London and, importantly, staying in London?
Yeah, sure. As I said, did a teaching degree and actually only taught for a sort of five or so years around different parts of the world, really. So in a little bit in Shepparton, a little bit in Melbourne, in different schools, and then also over in Mexico. Taught for a year in Mexico. Did PE at an American school, essentially in Mexico, which was awesome. But when I got back from there, I'd kind of realised that it wasn't necessarily for me, but I still wanted to be involved in sport and involved in kids sport. I love that aspect and trying to get more kids active and more people playing more sport more often is kind of even at DMC now where I am, that's part of our values. And so that led me to working with the Australian Sports Commission. Back then it was called, now Sport Australia, and that was back then it was called the Active After School Communities, which is now called sporting schools, I believe it is. So I was a development manager or a regional manager for the active after schools in Melbourne, that was a perfect sort of intro into the business side of sport, but still very school and participation based. So that was working with schools to get sports to come in and run those activities after school. Really cool program that's still, from what I can see from afar, really successful. And that got me involved in grew my network really well, especially when I moved to Canberra for a couple of years to kind of go to the national office there and work in the participation team there, which essentially was the department at the government that would give the money to sports to then go and target different segments of the community. So whether it's kids, whether it's girls and women, whether it's people with disability, people from a multicultural or Indigenous background. So sports now have funding to sort of create programs and campaigns. And so we would provide that funding and then help them with some advice. And that was really cool because it meant I had a portfolio of sports around the country that I could work with, and then again that kind of opened my eyes to the national governing bodies and increased my network really, probably most importantly. So I had sort of some big sports like Cricket Australia and Swimming Australia in my portfolio, but then had some some sports that were up and coming, if you like, or not as well resourced. And who else was it? So I had lawn bowls Australia, surfing Australia, triathlon Australia. So these big sporting bodies, but that we know as Australians have been very successful at the top end, but kids and young people playing, being involved in those sports at a participation level is not high. So it was really cool to have that breadth of experience or portfolio of sports to work with. However, the lure of Melbourne and meeting my future wife drew me back to Melbourne, and that meant finding a job. And thankfully, probably through that network and that I'd made, I was able to land a job with Netball Australia as general manager of participation. So kind of combined all of that experience really well to look after the NetSec Go program and some of the sort of community programs, school ambassador programs, things like that. So I was there for sort of 3 or 4 years. We had a really good time during the 2015 World Cup in Sydney, which we were heavily involved in. My wife and I decided to come over to London. We'd never been to Europe. We'd never been to London. And neither of us had a job lined up. But we thought, we had some friends over here and I had some sort of possible contacts, and I guess always had my teaching degree to fall back on. I knew that, there's a teacher shortage in London, probably like everywhere, but I knew if we needed to put food on the table, then I could obviously go and do some teaching at a school, which actually happened in the end for a few months while I found my feet and did a bit of travel. So that's where we ended up in London, and we loved it and still love it nearly 7.5 years later. So it's been really good and hard work, but really enjoyed it and love being here.
No, brilliant. We love a good career journey, and we love seeing people just jump from, there's so many stories of people jumping overseas and finding something that, that they love, and then they never leave. And it just sort of shows the power of moving overseas and finding different opportunities, which is awesome. And now you're at DMC. For those tuning in, do you want to just give us a bit of a summary of who DMC are and what does your role look like day to day?
Yeah. So, I mean, even I think I said, so I kind of did a bit of teaching, knew a few of the guys at the ECB, a couple of Australians were working there. So the Aussie network helped me out there and did a bit of sort of consulting or contract work with the ECB, again, while I was sort of finding my feet. But DMC then won a contract with the ECB, and they kind of chatted and through various networks and family and all that kind of, they heard that I was here, and they kind of recommended that I get involved. And so started out as an account manager part-time by myself sort of 6 years ago. I was DMC are based in Melbourne, started in Melbourne 10 years ago, DMC Sport, that is. And it was bred out of Dino and Louise, our founders and now managing director and CEO. they saw a gap in the market in Melbourne, in Australia, based in Melbourne, where sports were struggling a little bit with quality sporting equipment fit for purpose and the logistics behind it. So, you could always go out and get, decent sporting equipment, but there wasn't much innovation or kind of efficiency around getting that kit out to the kids or to the clubs or the parents or coaches or whoever it might be. And they had a bit of experience quite a bit of experience in direct marketing and logistics. And so they combined those two things and started DMC Sport. The best way to explain what we do, I think, I'm guessing the majority of your audience is in Australia, but if you sign up to a junior program like a Netset Go, like a Woolworths Blast, an Oz Kick, Hot Shots, whatever it might be, you sign up as a parent, or you sign your kid up as a parent, and you'll get sent a cricket bat, a backpack, a ball, a drink bottle, hat, t-shirt. So we produce all of that equipment and then get it to the child or to the coach or to the club. And so we do that full end-to-end management of the product and the logistics. So we're not a brand as such, we're a white label. So we don't put the DMC brand on any of the equipment or any of the shirts. We put the program brand, so it's the Woolworths Blast brand or it's the Netset Go brand. And so basically we manage all of that. Traditionally, that might get left to the development staff and some of the operational staff in the office, and you'll find boardrooms full of envelopes being packed or whatever it might be. We take all that worry off those guys, so then they can actually be experts and do the work that they're paid to be doing, not to be stacking envelopes or packing kit bags or whatever it might be. So we take all of that away from them and manage it and now do it in a excuse me, in a way that is quite efficient and technology led. So we utilize various platforms to allow analysis and reporting, live data that can come through to the organisation, so they can they can do inventory management a lot better. They can they can work out where stock is, how much value they've got in the warehouse, etc. So we've managed to really find a space that and a process that works for sports around the world now. And so those programs like Woolworths Blast and Oz Kick, they've been around for 30 or 40 years in Australia, whereas over here in the UK, it's probably, All Stars Cricket with the ECB is probably the first nationally led program of that type over here. And that's 6 years ago that we won the contract and started working with them on that. And they they took Woolworths Blast and best features of different programs in Australia, brought it over here and created a really, really good program. And in six years or so, they're getting 120,000 kids playing each year, which is unreal. So that's what DMC do. And then I guess my role within that is started off as an account manager, and now 6 years later, we're soon to have 5 staff here in the London office, and I'm commercial director, so managing those staff, managing the relationships at the kind of higher end of those partnerships that we have. So trying to identify any opportunities within those current partners, but also meeting with potential clients both here in the UK and now in the US. We're dipping our toe into the US to see whether there's a need and market there for our services. So that's a rough kind of idea of my role, and it's ever changing, which is really cool, and lots of variety, which is also really good.
Amazing. I reckon a lot of people would have had some sort of touch point with DMC without even realising it along the journey.
Yeah, it is fascinating. Sorry to cut you, but yeah, I'll be walking at the airport or something, and you'll see an All Stars backpack, and you just want to go up and shake the parent's hand or say thanks. But it's pretty cool to see the kid out there, and I've been lucky enough to visit India and see the products being made there. So you see it right from that point through to a kid or a parent enjoying or a coach enjoying the kit, it's quite a cool experience.
That's very cool. Let's switch lanes to sport in London, and I was wondering if you could give us a bit of an overview of the industry there. I know a lot of people might be familiar with what the industry looks like in, say, Melbourne, where you've got a whole bunch of professional teams, a lot of national bodies, agencies that support that, and other opportunities that come up. How does something like the industry in Melbourne compare to what's happening in London?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of similarities, but there's like an industry, there's different aspects or complexities within that. You think it's, and I guess I can only speak from my sort of personal experience, but I had a really good network in Melbourne in the sports industry and in Australia, actually, given my time at the Sports Commission and Netball Australia and working around with the states there. But you kind of say that it is quite a small industry there. Everyone knows everyone. When I got here, I thought, oh, this is crazy. Like, I don't know anyone, and how am I gonna lean on some of those networks? But thankfully, through those networks in Australia, I was able to meet with people. So as soon as I got here, I kind of started having coffees and beers with different people in different sporting bodies over here. And I must say that most, if not all, were really kind with their time and keen to help and just have a coffee with someone they'd never met. Probably doing a favour for a friend or whatever. So in that sense, it's very similar. So the sporting industry over here, while it's a lot bigger in terms of the amount of people here, it is the same. It is quite small. People, particularly in certain. So if you're in the commercial, or if you're in marketing, or if you're in sport development, within those kind of sectors of the sports industry, it is quite small, which is pretty cool, because you can get to meet people at different conferences or networking events, and then share knowledge and share the journey together, I guess. So that's pretty cool. So that's the one similarity. I think one of the big differences is that is the leagues and those clubs are definitely massive beasts over here and different. So you're talking about your EPL clubs, and if we use football over here as an example, it's just a huge industry, obviously. And the EPL clubs are only one part of it. Like it's I don't know the numbers, but there's hundreds of clubs that go right down to local football that are still paying some players and still are running businesses. And I think you can probably get a little bit lost in that, and everyone talks about going to an EPL club, but it's good to remember that there are other clubs, and there's the lower leagues, and the English Football League and the FA. So there's different parts of that. So it is bigger in that sense as well. So yeah, that's kind of, it does take a bit of time to get your head around it, but it's it is all there, and people are willing to help. If you find the right avenue.
I love that you mention all the soccer leagues. I'm sure there's plenty of people tuning in who think, I'd love to work for a Premier League team one day, but also, would be happy to go and work for Hereford Football Club in the fifth tier or something like that, because that is still very much like, no, I don't know if it is professional. It is professional.
Yeah,
but
no, it is.
There's so many opportunities there, whereas like in Australia, it's like, you're only really going to want to be working for an A-League team, because that is the only professional league. So it sounds like there's just a lot of avenues there, which is awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if people, there's an Aussie that's the CEO of a club here, Ebbsfleet United, and they won their division last year, so they're going up to league football. So that's very confusing. I think it's sort of maybe fifth division, so 5 levels under the EPL, and Damien, the CEO, is an Aussie. He's running a really good club out there, and it's a small community club, but he's making money, and they're employing people for all sorts of roles there. And so I actually took a bunch of mates out there one day for president's lunch, and it's like a good community club that runs like any other business. So it's really cool.
Ryan, that reminds me a bit of Mitch Woods going up to run the Noosa Tigers in the NEFL.
Very much. The Super Box.
I know Mitch as well. I've played.
There you go.
Worked with Mitch at Netball Australia. So yeah, I followed him up there and saw. Did he was playing as well as involved?
He could have easily played. I'm not sure if he pulled the boots on. He's a very, very fit man. But good on the administration side too.
The inventor of the Super Box. So never been done before, the Super Box. He
at the grassroots level.
Yeah, he commercialised the Super Box at grassroots level. So he goes down in
made people believe.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, he goes down in history. And shout out to Mitch, he'd be listening. Chris, when I first heard your name, it was in the same discussion of the Mullagh Group, which we mentioned just before we got on air. Can you tell us a little bit about it? How did it start, and what sort of people are inside?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great group, the Mullagh Group, and even a few of the people that I've mentioned so far, this morning, are involved. So Damien, the chap I mentioned, who's the CEO of Ebbsfleet United, he's involved and a very active member of the Mullagh Group. So basically, the Mullagh Group, I can definitely won't take credit in starting it or being involved sort of heavily early days, but it was started by about sort of 4 or 5 of us really, who were catching up and realised in London we're all Aussies, all involved in sport, and all doing really good things. And so the Mullagh Group was kind of born out of that. And Tom Rishbith, who you may or may not know, who's now working back at Football Australia, he was involved. So he was pivotal in starting it really. But there was a bunch of us, and we realised that we were doing good work and that we enjoyed having a beer together. And so what we thought the idea would be that we'd start a networking group, essentially, a really informal sort of casual networking group that would catch up irregularly, really, or informally, and just chat about, just catch up. So I think the idea was to be able to help each other out when we could as well. So share stories, share the war stories and the good times and successes, but also if we could help each other out by using each other's services or helping each other recruitment. So if we needed someone that using our networks basically. And so that's where it started, and it really it was word of mouth. So this is pre-COVID, and so we'd catch up maybe once every month or two. And if you couldn't come, that was fine. There's no sort of membership, no payment needed or anything like that. It was all done. James Earl, who's over here, he and his team at his work managed the mailing list, which was a tough work as well, because you just get random emails from people that would want to be put on the list. And basically, we'd send out a note to everyone on that list saying, "Look, we're going to head to this pub for a few beers. Come along if you can, and bring whoever you like." The rough sort of structure is that you don't have to be an Aussie, but you kind of connected to Australia in sport. So you may be an English person that's worked in sport in Australia, and now you've moved back and you want to stay connected or whatever it might be. And so I think pre-COVID we were kind of 100, 150 people on that list. So it was quite strong. Starting to we started to connect with the High Commission over here, so Australia House, who were having various events where they would invite us to. So that we'd often use that as our catch up there at Australia House. So whether it was, one year we had Rod Laver speak during Wimbledon, so they invited to a breakfast, so we got invited to that. Or we had during the Rugby World Cup, we had a couple of all these players and Eddie Jones maybe, but basically whatever we could, we just attach ourselves to and get involved. And the reason that we called it the Mullagh Group was because of Johnny Mullagh, who was part of the first Indigenous team, or the first team to come over and tour Australia to play cricket. And he there's some fascinating stories. I think the medal is now named after him, the Johnny Mullagh medal, which I think is that the Boxing Day Test medal, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the Boxing Day one.
Scotty Boland won last year. Yeah, so that's named after the same person, obviously, and the reason we named it after him was because he came over here, did some great things, and showed the Poms how to do it, and that's kind of the rough premise of what we're not coming over to show them how to do it, but we're coming over here and doing some really good things, and post COVID we're starting to build it back up again, and we've changed the ways we've managed it in terms of we haven't got the mailing list these days because it just came a bit hard, and so we've kind of we tried Slack and we've tried LinkedIn and different ways to manage it, and now it's really just a big WhatsApp group that we add people in and people can join, and when you join you kind of give a bit of an intro about yourself and why you're in the group or what you're doing here and are you looking for work or whatever. So it's really cool, and it's led to a lot of connections. It's led to some great discussions and partnerships. So it's something really cool to be a part of. And I'd suggest anyone that is moving over and wants to work in the sports industry, that's if nothing else, it's a good way to meet people, to have a beer and just catch up and learn a bit more.
We had one of our members, Angus Yeats, tell us about the Mullagh Group. I think he was living in Germany, but flew over during the FIFA World Cup last year, I think it was, to hang out and watch the Socceroos play. I recall might have been that.
Yeah. He touched base and said he was going to come over, and I was like, "Oh, look, mate, it's not a formal thing, but and he's like, "No, I want to come across. I don't want to watch the football with a bunch of Aussies. Like, what a better way to spend it." And I was like, "Yeah," and so I believe he's sort of made some connections through that as well, which was really cool.
Yeah, and then Bennett Merriman put me in touch with you when I was coming over to London for a couple of weeks, and I got introduced to the group and went through the process that you mentioned, introduced myself on the WhatsApp, and then immediately had a bunch of people reach out. One of them was Nick Pride, and this is when I started to realise like the supportiveness of the group that you guys have fostered. Like immediately Nick was like, "Hey, I'm working at the ECB, let's have a chat next week." Went in, met Nick, and then he invited me to this like half-day conference a week after that where I bumped into you again, Chris, where in the room was people from like the NBA, Premier League, NFL, and I was like, "Oh my God, like how did I end up here?" But the Mullagh Group is good for stuff like that, I've quickly found out.
Yeah, that's exactly, and that's textbook kind of case of why it's there, and it's been great for a lot of people, and highly recommend getting involved, and there's no obligation either, so whether you can make it or to catch up or not, but I think probably, and you would have seen being in the groups that probably once a week there's someone in there advertising a job or something, so we've got the only real rule is we don't kind of sell anything in there, so you're not there's no none of that kind of explicit selling of stuff or anything like that. It's very just recruiting and catch up, and even during the Ashes there's people sort of got tickets or to events or whatever, so it's things like that, giving away tickets or opportunities, which is great, but we try and keep it pretty informal and pretty social.
Yeah, there were a lot of requests for tickets going around during the Ashes. I noticed. They were hot property.
Yeah, that was thankfully I think that's all finished now.
Yeah. Another guest who we had on the podcast recently is a guy called Tom Hickey, who's a commercial director at Brisbane 2032, and he made a career move to New York, and he talked about getting established over in a new city, and he mentioned that it was a lot easier for him being on the ground to get set up as opposed to trying to do it from home. Now, we talked to a lot of people who try and make a career move to London, and everyone loves a bit of certainty before you make a jump like that. But what is the likelihood of getting a job in London before you actually leave Australia?
Excuse me. I'm always envious or a little bit jealous of people that do land a job before they get here, because that is, especially in the sports. I think I think there's some other industries where you can maybe do it, or you can get a transfer or whatever it might be. But yeah, I mean, I think like I'm a big. We spoke about it before about Ryan. I think you said the moving over here and doing that and making the jump. I'm a big advocate for it. Obviously, like I've done it myself, but when someone always asks me if they should do it, I'm always saying, yeah, just jump at it. Especially for the people that don't have anything tying them back to Australia or to home or wherever it might be. There's those kind of opportunities before you get too many responsibilities or commitments back home are pretty limited. So I'm a big advocate for it. And there are lots of jobs here, and that's the thing. So whether it's might not be the exact job you want or the salary that you want, there are lots of jobs here. So if you do get stuck, you can grab a job while you're trying to look for something. However, I think there's a lot of preparation you can do before you move over here. So connecting with people, asking your network in Australia. Do you know anyone in England, or do you know anyone in New York, or wherever you're thinking of going? And using those connections, I think, are really cool to start. Hey, I'm on my way over. Can we grab a coffee? I land on this date. Where are you based? I'm happy to come to you. I think that's really important to do some of that prep work, and even just getting your name out there and making it known. Because things like the Mullagh Group, there might be jobs that come up and we say, oh, actually, Ruben's about to move over. He'd be great for this. You should have a chat to him, kind of thing. So there's lots of prep work you can do. I think once you get here, again, it's taking those opportunities up. So, if people have offered or have agreed to catch up with you for a coffee or a beer or whatever it is, then make sure you take that up and actually do that. I think there's opportunities to volunteer. I think there's the same as any other country or in Australia. There's opportunities to volunteer, which I think is a really good way to dip your toes in and get some experience on your CV. Ruben and you and I spoke about it, but there is a little bit of a I don't know what the word is, but there's if you haven't got sort of UK experience on your resume, then it may look like that you don't live here or that you're not ready to move here or whatever it might be. So there can be some of that a perception, I guess, that if you don't have UK experience, then you're not fit for the job, which may or may not be true. But it's I think they really would like to see some sort of UK experience, even if it's a job that's not really related to what you're trying to find. I think that's really important. There's some real practical things that you could do that might help in terms of your resume. I think if you put your address on your resume, then maybe try and have a UK address. If you've got a friend living in London or whatever, just say, can I put your address on there? I know when we first moved over, we stayed on our friend's couch until we found a house, and so you're going to need somewhere for your your bank details and all that kind of stuff anyway. So friends, like, it always gets passed on. If someone does it for me, I'll do it for the next person, and it works that way. And then as soon as you get here, having that UK phone number, so then then people can actually contact you. It could be daunting for someone in HR to be calling the Australian number and knowing time zones and all that kind of stuff. So as soon as you get here, getting a UK SIM and be contactable as easy as possible. I guess it's all about cutting down the reasons or the barriers to for not for whoever's sifting through the resumes to not give you not to put you on the pile to the side.
Like on that theme of expectations for Aussies moving over there, this might sound like a weird question, but we get a lot of people who ask us about this topic. And are there any particular organisations that are more likely to hire people from overseas? Have you noticed any particularly international organisations or any particularly English-oriented organisations, for example? We mentioned Tommy Hickey. He was over at the NFL, he talked about being, I think, one of 2 or 3 Australians in an organisation of like 1,000 people that was like 99% American, and just seemed like Americans know NFL, so they hire Americans to keep it going. Like, I guess for Aussies, what can they expect when they arrive here?
Yeah, I haven't noticed that too much. I think, the culturally England and Australia aren't miles apart. I do feel like the English organisations and people that are hiring, if they've had an Aussie in their team before, that they usually speak very highly of Australians, and particularly our work ethic, our willingness to sort of just crack in and have a go, and also get out of our comfort zone a little bit and try something that's not on our resume or not in our position description or whatever. I think that Australians have got a really good reputation in that culturally and work ethic sense. So lean on that, and I think definitely make that sort of known that is your the way you go about things. I think that's really important. But in terms of kind of organisations, I've not seen that. Potentially there might, everyone has sort of preconceptions about people from other countries or whatever it might be. But I've never seen it really take effect. I think it is probably important to realise or to remember that Aussie rules is, for an example, is not a sport that everyone knows over here. So if you're talking about working for an Aussie rules organisation, they may not know what you're talking about.
They'll be like, "What's that?"
Yeah, and the size and the kind of the context behind that might be really important. So I think that would be something to remember. And a lot of other sports, we're obviously got a very good reputation in sports, Australia. So they know, especially at the elite level and the sort of, I guess, more well-known sports. But it's really important to remember some context behind the sports industry in Australia and some of where you might be coming from.
Do you have to constantly make comparisons and say, "Oh, the AFL, it's kind of like the EPL, but it's only us.
We catch it. It's the only difference."
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of people. It is on. It's on. There's 4 or 5 games on every weekend on BT Sport. So if someone's flicking over, they'll see it. But it's usually, early in the morning or 10:30 on a Saturday morning or something. So. But they do. A lot of people do get it, but probably not the business side of things in terms of how big it is. And I love showing people who've got no idea about it. You show them some footage of the grand final, or even the other week, 100,000 people there, and even the cricket's the same. We sold out at the Oval yesterday with 30,000 people there, and the crowd was rocking. And it's like, Boxing Day's that times 3. So it's trying to give some. While Australia's small, the sport industry is relatively quite big. But it's the comparisons is easier for someone that knows Gaelic football. That's quite easy. Aussie rules and Gaelic football is quite easy, but it's it takes a bit of explanation every now and again.
They don't play that anymore, do they? Because it got a bit violent. Is that what happened?
Oh, the international rules? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they...
What happened with that rules?
I think they were going to play, and then COVID... I think they had it planned, actually, and then COVID... Like a lot of things, put an end to that. But they were going to bring it back, but it's hard to see them spending the money on that now, I think.
I remember there was a time where they had to just put it on ice for a little while because it was just like a boxing match from out there. I have no idea why. For some reason, the Irish and the Aussies just really went at it. But anyway, that's
I think those days are days that might be gone, and I think even yesterday sitting at the Oval, I love thinking about the stories of when they played the exhibition matches for the Aussie rules over there. And I think the Oval was where there was a big fight involved. I can't remember. North Melbourne and Carlton, maybe, I don't know, but
I think Alistair Clarkson was involved in that.
I think so. And I had some mates that were there actually, and they like the amount of streakers they had on that day is the record, Guinness Book of Records for streakers in one game, which is great. Bunch of Aussies
exhibition AFL
really
matches.
Enjoying it. Yeah,
love it. Chris, this has been a really good chat. One last question for you, and it's around like giving advice for people wanting to move over. Do you have sort of 2 or 3 things that you would say to people who are thinking about making that move to the UK to work in sport? What are those couple of things that you just say, do this and do that to make sure that they give themselves the best chance?
Yeah, I think I've kind of touched on a couple of those, but number one would definitely be the preparation. So, number one would be do it. I can't stress how I'm a big advocate. I'm a bit biased about it, but I think it's just a great way to, even if you are just coming for 2 or 3 years now, I think you can get your visa for now. Come over and get some experience in a newish environment. It'll increase your knowledge and give you something to go back to Australia with. I think it's really it's something really cool to take back and have in your kit bag in terms of looking for work when in Australia. And so that's number one. Do it, and it's not that hard. It seems really daunting, but the admin side of it is a little bit daunting, but it's actually quite easy. If you've got some good savings and you've got some get up and go about you, then I think it's quite good and not too hard. Secondly, I think is in terms of finding work. Don't discount not being able to get something before you get here. I think that while I said it's hard and you don't hear about it often, there's no harm in having a go and asking around and speaking to people, and you just never know. You don't know what's out there. So doing that prep and looking at salaries, looking at LinkedIn, obviously, and Glassdoor is the other website that gives you a really good understanding in terms of what salaries, what an account manager might be getting paid, or what your the expectations. And then making those connections, I think, is really important. So that can all be done before you get here. And then once you're here, it's hitting the ground running, and I think really, doing a few of those practical things around your phone, getting your phone sorted and all that kind of stuff. But just getting out, and it's you can't, if you're going to sit back and kind of wait for something, then you might struggle. So it's you've really got to put yourself out there, which could be uncomfortable for some people, but saying yes to events, saying yes to networking events, I should say, and yes to kind of coffees and catch-ups is the biggest thing I think over here is getting around and meeting people and learning off the people that are in the industry. I think is invaluable for those first few months, and I think be patient is the other thing. It can take sort of 6 months to settle in, find a job, and find a house and do all that kind of thing. You may have to share a house given the prices of houses in London. So doing that, if you haven't been doing that back home, then it could be a shock to the system. So kind of being patient and rolling with it a little bit is pretty important.
Nice. Ruse, before we wrap up, any other episodes you'd recommend for people doing similar things to Chris or in this zone of moving overseas as well?
Yeah, well, there's for people who there's one particular guest who's already in the UK, Tom Rose, episode 69, working in marketing at Southampton. South or Sut?
He just got a job at Manchester City.
Yes, actually, I did see that.
Huge.
He's moving to Abu Dhabi. I did see that. So maybe
oh wow,
follow him on LinkedIn to follow his journey, and then go back and listen to his episode to see how he got there.
Yeah.
Carlo Kasparian is another one who did the London move. Ended up working at the Chelsea Foundation. He's episode 20. And then we mentioned Mitch Woods. If anyone wants to listen to him, I believe he's episode 30. I think. That's stretching the memory.
Testing the memory.
But he's around that mark.
And Tom Hickey as well, as we mentioned before. Only recently.
Tom Hickey more, very recently, in the 240s.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Well, Chris, it has been fantastic having you on, mate, and we've obviously heard great things from over here in Australia, and it sounds like, the work you're doing with DMC is just awesome. And the Mullagh Group as well, I've heard all about that, but just hearing about your journey in sport and also just some of those things that you pointed out around moving to the UK is, well, they're going to be super useful for listeners looking to do the same thing. So really appreciate your time today, and hopefully catch up in person soon.
Yeah, no worries, guys. I'm certainly happy to chat to people that want to come over and obviously get them involved in the Mullagh Group as well. And love what you guys are doing. We've heard, obviously I've heard good things about you guys and being able to catch up. And actually, I think DMC, we had Seka that came through you guys that worked for us for a little while, and he's now at Cricket Australia.
Yep.
Who are one of our partners. So yeah, so we've got a good connection, and I think across Dina and Louise and all the way over here, there's a good connection, and appreciate the work you're doing. So keep it up.
Absolutely, thank you. Hey guys, one last thing before you go. If you'd enjoy a quick email from us each Friday on all the latest job openings, networking events, Q&As with industry professionals, and latest podcast episodes, then subscribe to the SportsGrad newsletter. Head to our website, www.sportsgrad.com.au/newsletter to subscribe. There's also a link in our show notes to join.